Welcome to BookPilot, your destination for powerful ideas from the world's most impactful books. Okay, let's jump right into this one. Today we're unpacking Robert Greene's modern classic, The 48 Laws of Power. Greene has basically taken 3,000 years of history, philosophy, and just ruthless power dynamics and distilled them down into an absolute survival guide. Because look, whether we actually like it or not, power is a game that every single one of us is forced to play.
Centuries ago, Machiavelli completely hit the nail on the head when he said, "Any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to come to ruin among the great number who are not good." You see, the modern world operates a lot like a giant, scheming aristocratic court, right? We demand that things look fair and democratic on the outside, but underneath that glittering surface, the exact same dark emotions are boiling away: greed, envy, ambition. Simply ignoring the realities of power doesn't make you noble. Honestly, it just leaves you completely vulnerable.
So, to make sure you don't end up vulnerable, we're breaking this explainer down into a few key sections: a book overview, cultivating your aura, the art of concealment, navigating allies and enemies, and finally, some key practical takeaways.
Section 1. Book Overview. Before we even get into the individual laws, we have to understand what Greene calls the courtier's dilemma. Historically, courts were supposed to be the absolute pinnacle of civilization, which meant violent or overt power grabs were a massive no-go. So, courtiers who wanted to win the king's favor had to be incredibly subtle. If you curried favor too obviously, you'd instantly trigger the envy and wrath of your peers. And honestly, today, we face the exact same dilemma. We have to appear perfectly decent and fair while subtly outmaneuvering our opponents. That brings us to this incredibly famous piece of advice from Napoleon: place your iron hand inside a velvet glove. The whole point here is that the ultimate player of the game never uses brute force or outright treachery. Instead, they get exactly what they want through seduction, charm, deception, and strategic indirection. You're getting people to bend to your will without them even realizing what you've just done. Section 2. Cultivating your aura. This theme is all about how you strategically present yourself to the world to command respect. Now, humans judge everything by appearances. Law 5 warns us to guard our reputation with our life, because reputation is quite literally the cornerstone of power. With it, you can win without even lifting a finger. But to pull this off, Law 25 tells us we must recreate ourselves. Don't just settle for the default role society hands you. Forge an identity that commands attention, which ties right into Law 6, court attention at all costs. In a modern workplace, for example, this means positioning yourself as the indispensable expert, rather than just blending in as another employee. A perfect example of this is the infamous con artist Count Victor Lustig. Lustig knew that an air of mystery draws people in like a magnet. He would show up at these upscale hotels, barely say a word, and just sit in the dining room reading a massive, impressive-looking book while acting totally aloof. Simply by cultivating this enigmatic aura, he effortlessly pulled wealthy targets right into his orbit. They literally begged for his confidence, completely blind to the fact that they were being totally set up. Section 3. The Art of Concealment. Once you actually have people's attention, the absolute worst thing you can do is give the whole game away. Mastering your tongue is crucial here. We're looking at Law 3, conceal your intentions; Law 4, always say less than necessary; and Law 12, use selective honesty and generosity. To maintain power, you have to actively hide your true motives. You do this by tossing out red herrings, using calculated silences, and occasionally dropping a perfectly timed, seemingly honest gesture. Just one moment of calculated vulnerability can completely disarm a suspicious opponent. Now, we're all taught from day one that perfect honesty is a virtue. But in this game, the illusion of complete honesty just makes you predictable. Plus, absolute, unfiltered honesty usually just ends up offending people anyway. What you actually need is strategic concealment. By putting up a bland, inconspicuous front, or maybe selectively sharing completely harmless secrets, you create a massive smokescreen. It totally hides your true goals and keeps you firmly in the driver's seat. King Louis XIV was literally a master at this. When his ministers would ramble on and on, trying to impress him or argue a point, he would simply hit them with 3 words: "I shall see." By saying less than necessary, he kept everyone around him terrified, completely off balance, and totally in the dark about what he was actually thinking. The silence was so uncomfortable that his subordinates would just keep talking to fill it, usually revealing their own weaknesses in the process. Section 4. Navigating allies and enemies. This is where the game gets incredibly delicate. These laws are purely about survival. Law 1 is arguably the most important rule in the entire book. Never outshine the master. Making your superiors feel insecure by flaunting your talents is a fatal mistake. You also have to completely rethink friendship. As Law 2 points out, friends are incredibly easy to arouse to envy. Ultimately, Law 11 is where your true security lies. Make people completely dependent on you. If someone literally needs you to achieve their own goals, they can never, ever afford to get rid of you.
If you want to see exactly what happens when you violate Law 1, just look at the tragic fall of Nicolas Fouquet, Louis XIV's finance minister. Back in 1661, Fouquet threw the most spectacular, lavish party the world had ever seen, genuinely intending to honor the king and prove his own worth. But the whole extravagant display ended up completely overshadowing the king himself. He accidentally poked massive holes in Louis's vanity, and the result? Literally the very next day, Fouquet was arrested, later found guilty on trumped-up charges, and spent the final 20 years of his life in solitary confinement. He outshone the master, and it absolutely destroyed him.
Contrast that blunder with Galileo's pure genius. Galileo relied on the patronage of rulers, which, as we know, was an incredibly insecure way to live. But when he discovered Jupiter's moons, he didn't just claim all the glory for himself. Instead, he linked those 4 moons to the 4 brothers of the powerful Medici family, making their glory cosmic. He gave his masters the ultimate credit, and in return, they gave him a highly secure lifetime position as the official court philosopher and mathematician. Brilliant, right?
Now, think for a second about the people you surround yourself with. It is totally natural to want to hire our friends, but the hidden dangers there are massive. Envy, a huge sense of entitlement, and eventually a total lack of gratitude. Friends often feel they were hired specifically because they're your friends, not because they actually earned it. But if you co-opt a former enemy, someone whose life or livelihood you've just spared, they come in with minimal expectations, intense loyalty, and a totally desperate need to prove their worth to you.
So, looking at all of this, all the deception, the manipulation, the intense strategy, how on earth do we actually survive this ruthless game without losing our minds or, winding up in solitary confinement like Fouquet?
Section 5. Key practical takeaways. Here are the foundational mindsets you absolutely need to internalize from these 48 laws. First and foremost, you have to master your emotions. Anger is the single most destructive response because it just completely clouds your vision and eliminates your strategic options. Second, view the world objectively, almost like a game. Don't waste time judging people's actions by whether their intentions were good or evil. Judge them purely by their effects. And finally, always execute your maneuvers indirectly. Disguise your cunning. You want to be the billiard ball that bounces off 3 different cushions before finally hitting the target. Ultimately, you have to ask yourself one question. Are you going to learn to master the rules of the game, or are you just going to remain a pawn in someone else's? If you enjoyed this audiobook summary and want to discover more powerful ideas from great books, subscribe to BookPilot and stay tuned for more.